Hey guys, I've had a few requests for this video, so I wanted to make a quick tutorial on how to get set up with ACES. This isn't going to be an in-depth look of what ACES actually is. I'll leave that for another video, but I will put some great links in the description below on where you can find some more information on ACES. If you search online for ACES, you'll probably come across an image like this. This image represents the color gamuts of sRGB and ACES, with the red, green and blue color primaries mapped out here. As you can see, ACES uses a much wider color gamut than the traditional sRGB. There's a few different color spaces under ACES, but the one that we'll be using is ACEScg. When you download an image from the internet, it's usually an 8-bit JPEG file or PNG file in the standard sRGB color gamut. The information on the image would be stored linearly, but the problem is that on our monitors or our phones, the image would appear too dark, so a gamma curve is applied to the image to make the image look correct on our phones and monitors. If we use this image as a texture in a traditional linear sRGB workflow, we would want to apply the inverse gamma on the image, which would make it render linearly. In an ACES workflow, we still want to work linearly, but we also want to convert the images from sRGB primaries into the ACES primaries. We do this by using an input transform. ACES is used for color management within all aspects of film and CG. It helps to keep all of our colors consistent throughout the texturing and rendering pipeline. If you're creating textures in Mari in a traditional linear sRGB color gamut, but bringing them into Maya Arnold and then rendering them in ACEScg, it's going to give you some unexpected results. The same thing applies if you're rendering in ACEScg but viewing it in Nuke or Photoshop in linear sRGB. Your renders are not going to look correct. What we want is for all of our color pipeline to be under ACES. This way you'll get consistent colors and results throughout your projects. So, to get this set up, what we need is an ACES config file. You can get this ACES config file by either downloading it or grabbing the one that comes with Nuke. To download it, just go to GitHub and search for ACES OCIO configs. Here you can download the latest ACES config file. I'm actually using ACES 1.1, but as you can see, there's also ACES 1.2 now available. The way that I got my ACES config file was I just grabbed the one that comes with Nuke. So inside the Nuke folders, you can just go to Plugins, OCIO config, and then copy the ACES 1.1 folder. After that's copied, go to one of your drives and create a folder called OCIO and paste it inside of there. In order for this to be picked up by your various software, you'll have to create an environment variable. So in Windows, go to Environment Variables, select New, and call it OCIO, and search for your config ACES 1.1 file in the variables, and then press OK to that. So to make sure all of that's working, we can go into Maya and go to the Windows Settings and Preferences, and then to the Color Management tab. You'll see that the OCIO path is set to the right file, my rendering space is set to ACEScg, and my view transform for my monitor is set to sRGB ACES. For Mari, there's a few Mari specific changes that we need to make in the config file in order to make ACES work correctly. In the Mari program folder, go to Bundle, Media, Color, and OCIO, and open the config file. Mari uses ACES 1.0.3 by default, but we want to use 1.1.0 or 1.2.0. Mari uses specific naming conventions for the input transforms that convert the various file types into ACES, and we can find those here. So all we need to do is copy these lines and paste them into our ACES 1.1 config file. Once that's done, if we save that and open up Mari and go to File, New Project, and then go to the color settings, we can see that it's using the ACES OCIO config environment variable that we just set up, and it's also using the specific Mari input transforms on the various file types. In Nuke, it's very simple. To check out what color space we're using, just go to the Edit tab and to Project Settings. Click on the Color tab and change the color management from default Nuke to OCIO. This will set our OCIO environment variable. Now that I'm in Nuke, I want to show you a quick trick to convert regular linear sRGB HDRIs into ACES and then grade them to be somewhat neutral. Now before I start, I must clarify that this method isn't 100% perfect. The only way to get really accurate color results in your HDRIs is either to create them yourself or to buy them from a professional colorist. However, this method I found is a good compromise. So I usually get my HDRIs from a website called HDRI Haven. I'll leave a link in the description below. When I'm looking for a HDRI, I'm looking for one that comes with a ColorChecker. I'll download the files, usually in 4K or 8K, and I'll bring them into Nuke. The first thing that I want to do is to convert the HDRI into ACES using an input transform. The HDRIs from HDRI Haven are all captured with sRGB, and the transforms applied are also sRGB. So with the file selected, I'll change the color space to linear sRGB. This should always be used with RAW files or HDR files. Now it's using the ACES primaries. I'll do the same thing for the ColorChecker. I can see that the ColorChecker for this particular HDRI is well overexposed. So to correct that, I'm going to pick a spot on the ground where I believe the ColorChecker was captured on the HDRI, and then I'll take note of those values. Now, with an exposure node under the ColorChecker, I'll grab that section of the ground and I'll expose down until it matches the HDRI's values. Now I want to make sure that my HDRI is neutralized. So for this next part, I downloaded this gizmo by an extremely knowledgeable guy called Thomas Mansinkal from nukepedia.com. I'll leave a link in the description below and where you can find it. What I want to do now is to match my mid-gray swatch with the ColorChecker to the ACES ColorChecker. The color space on the gizmo must be ACEScg. I'm going to grab a selection on the mid-gray color swatch and take down a note of the values. I'll then select the same mid-gray swatch on my color chart and use an exposure node to get my values closer, and then a grade node to refine those values until they match. After that, all I have to do is copy and paste these nodes onto my HDRI, create a write node and set its color space to ACEScg, and then save it out as a 32-bit EXR file. I now have a HDRI converted to the ACES primaries that's also somewhat neutralized. And that's it, we're all set up in ACES. I'll create another video that goes more in depth on ACES and why we should be using it for 3D, and the various transforms to use on the different file types. But for now, we've got our programs all using the same color space and some HDRI to use to render. I hope you found this video useful. Cheers guys.